Okay, cool.
Hello and welcome. This is Gareth from the iMoot team. Great pleasure to introduce Jetha Chan, who's going to talk about templates in Moodle 2.9, Moustache, all the new wonderful stuff that I've actually been reading about. Really looking for this. Can I say thank you, because this must have taken a long time to take and present and to build. So once again, thank you very much, Jetha, and over to you.
All right. Thanks, Gareth. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm an HQ developer. I've been there for just over a year, and it's my distinct pleasure to talk about templates today. Damien, our dev manager, really did the lion's share of the underlying work, which is reflected in all the commits and all the documentation. So here I am, really just standing on his shoulders. And not bucking for a raise at all. So templates in Moodle 2.9. I mean, we've got some. I polled the audience just while we were getting set up, and it seems like we've got a decent mix. We've got some developers here, people who support and people who contribute to core Moodle as well. And I think that templates are really gonna make all of our lives so much easier and so much better. And as to why, I guess let's just get into that now. That is, if I click this button and then, yeah, okay, cool. So why are we doing it? So in the simplest way to describe it is just we're decoupling, the generation of the HTML from the code. Like to use MVC notation, like we are separating the view from the controller and the model. This allows for easier customization. Like currently, if you need to, for instance, probably the best example is when we were transitioning from from base to Bootstrap base. A lot of the things we were doing in base Moodle, like we had to sort of like patch and cover the distance, change the renderer behavior, and the only way to do that at the time was to extend the renderer, override some methods, and I think we can all agree that that's probably too much. That's probably too involved for just what is ostensibly just theming, right? And on top of all that, it's a really great opportunity to just go through Moodle and like just kind of poke some of the hairier sections and just kind of see whether we can improve performance. Just go to the next slide. All right, so as for the templating technology, it's powered by Moustache, or handlebars, whatever the one we're using is called Moustache. And as to why it's called Moustache, it's kind of a brace-based syntax, and it's seen rapid adoption over the last 12 to 18 months. So this should also help us getting new blood into the community. Like you don't need, like if you haven't done Moodle before and you come in and you were to come in like as recently as like 3 months ago, you would have to learn our weird HTML writer syntax and or worse, like hard code your HTML strings, which it's not nice, not great. But if you know Moustache, if you've used handlebars with say Ember.js or something, like it's really easy now to come in. So as for Moustache, yeah, I've touched on it a little bit earlier, but it's a very popular standard. Perhaps the biggest win we have is that it allows our PHP and our JavaScript to use the same templates. Yes, and there's a question in the chat. So this will become the default Moodle templating. Yes, it will become it. It is not yet it. Yeah, Smarty. I can't really speak to the politics of Smarty versus this, but as I understand it, the decision was based on not just on popularity, but also based on using PHP and JavaScript at the same time. So, yeah. So there's strong potential for things like contact lists and messaging and dynamic content. Yeah, there's it's like any time where you have like a mutable state on a page, like like a conversation or something, right? And where you also need to like restore that state, like when you go to like a detailed view of again a conversation, like it's just really good to be able to have PHP and JavaScript use the same templates to sort of like pre-generate as much as you can, and also dynamically allocate when you need to easily, in a very maintainable way. I mean, like the definition of an update anomaly, right? Like if you were to try and do like a live messaging feature in Moodle now, like you'd have to keep remembering, oh, I've updated the PHP template, which means I need to update the JavaScript template, which means I need to update the, like it's not great. But perhaps one of the biggest wins from our approach is like when we create these core templates, but they're actually, instead of like overriding a renderer now, like a themer doesn't really need to even know much PHP. Like in theory, they could just like with a bare minimum of like layout files and whatever, they could just override templates in their theme, and we'll get to that later. But as to the vision for what we're trying to do, well, here's what we're trying to do. This wonderful future, like so. Ideally, like when you develop for on top of Moodle, like when plugins and core components that you're trying to get into the core product itself, like I mean, we'd really like it if it was possible for you to write as little in the way of custom HTML as possible. Like we don't want you to be like, input class equals button. Like we would much rather you like in the data model for your component say, I need a button here, and then here's the data for it. The idea is we'll provide with you a good element library of buttons and like lists and sliders and such, so which you can build your components out of. And the real, not the real, but one huge win we're going to get here is it'll enable us to pivot to new frameworks as they come in and out of vogue. Like when it took us, I think, 2 years to transition to Bootstrap 2, by the end of which, I mean, Bootstrap 2 was deprecated, and no one likes to be working on the old thing, right? We have a lot of we've got some Bootstrap 3 themes in the community, I think, and there's a ongoing lobby trying to get Bootstrap 3 into core, to which I am sympathetic. I mean, I love Bootstrap 3, but the only issue we have, of course, is that our development cadence kind of lags the speed with which these frameworks come out, right? I mean, if we were, I mean, let's hypothetically say in some alternate reality, we were to drop everything and try and like rewrite like large swaths of Moodle for 3.0 such that it supports Bootstrap 3, we would then be faced with a problem because then Moodle 3.0, the scheduled release date is after the release date of Bootstrap 4, which will obviously consign Bootstrap 3 to the dustbin of history. So, if we had the ability, if we had the technology to, sort of templatize as much of Moodle as possible, like, you would never again be restricted by what classes we're emitting, what markup we're emitting from core. You could just change the templates, and then everything that uses, say, like, if you change a Bootstrap 2 button template to like a Bootstrap 4 button template, like everywhere that used that Bootstrap 2 template is now going to show you that new hotness. And like, that's what we're really striving to enable here. So it's sort of like a, like slow to begin with, but maybe the long-term gain will just be enough to just be a really big payoff. Of course, there are some caveats. I don't want to I don't want to say that this is perfect. And most of these caveats are, yes, that's correct, Gareth. The question was embed more in the layout files than the renderers. Not so much in the layout files themselves. Like the template files are they're sort of special special layout files. They're kind of closer to layout files than they are renderers. I'll show some later. but yes, before we get all carried away and my mouth starts starts signing checks that my code can't cache, it's still early days, and so performance information is a little sparse right now. We have in 2.9 we have a notification templatable renderable. We've also moved over PixIcon just to see like what's the smallest thing we could possibly templatize, which turns out to be a fairly pathological case for performance. But yeah, like I mean, at the end of the day, like we can't really give you performance information as to whether or not we've caused performance regressions before we try doing it, right? And I think I was going to mention it later under the heading of current HQ work, but one thing that I've been assigned to do is to kind of just like be an outrider and kind of like pick things out of the pile to try and templatize and determine and get a good list of do's and do nots, and measure performance as I go. We're not gonna. I would hesitate strongly before saying we're going to just give you all these templatized things and have them be hugely bad for performance. No, we will give you performance information, and in most cases, because it is a good opportunity for us to clean house. I would expect equal, potentially better performance of things that we migrate. Oh, that was meant to be a caveats slide, but I just turned into a cheerleader for a second there. All right. The other problems. Okay, so there are very few core components to build on at present. Yeah, we've given you PixIcon, and we've given you the notifications, but that's about it. This will obviously change later. One thing I've been assigned to do is spec up the element library, which will give you all those components that we alluded to earlier. And that'll be great. And of course, as developers for Moodle, I mean, I don't have the stats on me right now, but I mean, if you're a professional Moodle developer, like not working for like a client in particular, if you're developing on the platform and like hoping to reach as many institutions or users as you can, there is going to be a divide between using templates for 2.9 and beyond, and the ways that you're familiar with already for 2.8 and 2.7 LTS. So that is a concern, particularly for plugin developers. So let's get into some implementation details a little bit. So we'll talk about these template files, right? They're actual files in the file system, and they're as to where they're located. We place them inside the. It occurs to me that there's some errata in my slides where it says located in component name /templates. Imagine I wrote the actual component folder /templates, and so it should be fairly clear by the last point on the slide. But you load them by specifying component name /file name without a file extension. So as a good example here, if you ask the template system to load timer in mod lesson. This is just a general example because that template doesn't actually exist yet. That will go to the file system and try and load the template at mod/lesson/templates/timer.mustache. Yeah. As to how this can be overridden by themes, and this is great. I mean, like your themes can now contain a templates folder that contains overrides for those default templates grouped by component. And so you can see here, like, let's say that we had a theme called bogus or something, and that would have a templates folder within it, and then you'd put a folder in there called mod lesson timer.mustache, and that would override the default template. So you could have completely different markup in there compared to the default template that we supply, and just how you decide to format that particular component is completely up to you. As to how things are implemented in the actual PHP code. We've declared a new interface in, for those of you at home, it's in lib output components, I'm pretty sure. But it's just a one function interface called templatable. You just modify your class header saying that you're implementing it. Hold on one second. I'll just answer Ralph's question. The question is, what about other plugin types or core features? So I'm just going to go back one slide. Okay, so for other plugin types, I'd say that the component name is just the Frankenstyle name. Okay, so I guess like mod database or something. If we're talking core, then the core components such as format top call. I'm not sure I understand, Gareth. Oh, right. I think I do. Okay, right. Yeah, that so long as it's a valid component name, that should be fine. Just create a new templates folder within wherever that component lives, and the template system should be able to target it. Of course. Yeah, and block progress and such. Yeah. As for core features, just here in my desktop sharing, I was going to demonstrate this later, but this is some of the work that I've been doing. This is not in 2.9. This is actually through Dev. So we have these things that are built into 2.9, or Pix icon, which is broken in this code, but let's ignore the fact that it's broken. Here's a successful notification. Yeah, and you can see that because the notification is within the core namespace, the template itself for notification success is actually in lib templates. So right there in lib templates, because it's a core feature. Right. Yeah, I will I will confess to not knowing that much about course formats at the moment, though I should probably not say that too loudly because then I'll be assigned to a course format issue. Anyway, moving on. Hopefully that's answered those questions. Yeah, so theme overriding. Yeah, this is great. I hope no one has any questions about this, but yeah, you don't need to edit any PHP files to change the markup or change the classes or whatever. You can just write a new thing, shove it in your themes templates directory in the right one, and then Bob's your uncle, everything will work. As far as the PHP implementation goes, so your components, they just need to implement templatable, which is a one function interface, which the function being export for template. And that returns an object to combine with the mustache template. So, or alternatively an array. But basically, you can think of it as the mustache template being the view, and then like the result of export for template is just an object to combine with that view. It's the object that the view just grabs its data out of. And as for rendering it, this is an excerpt from the code we use to render the notifications right now in 2.9. So you see here we get a notification as a parameter. We call export for template on it. Export for template takes one parameter, and it's the renderer that's calling it, just so it knows where it's coming from. If it needs to render anything like any sub components or anything, then it has the ability to do that based on the render that's been passed. We get data that we can then pass to the mustache system, and then you can see here that we're passing the string telling us which template to load, as well as the data payload. I'd like to kind of close up a little bit by talking about current HQ efforts, like what we're doing right now. I've alluded to a bit to them earlier, but just some details. So we're working on MDL 50362, which is a spec for how and which core templates to create. It's a big responsibility, but yeah, I'm picking things like small things, big things, simple things, complicated things in Moodle. Not it would be ridiculous to try and do it all myself, but basically just trying to get a taste for like limitations and best practices that I can then kind of codify and then give to the rest of the devs. The rest of the devs are working on, I think they're working on lesson plans this starting sprint. And then the subsequent sprint, we're all going to be working on creating the core templates. So we should be in a good spot for 3.0 with stuff for you guys to build on. As far as identified best practices so far, this is what I've identified so far, just through way of yes, the Holy Grail would be the login layout. I'll add that to my list of suggestions. Yes, Gareth just suggested that I look and see how the login screen is done. But yes, so best practices that I've identified so far. One hugely obvious one is that we want to minimize CSS classes coming from PHP. I don't think there's ever been a time in the Moodle code base where we've omitted a CSS class from PHP and not regretted it later. I'm looking at, I think David Scottson is putting together an epic of tasks relating to HTML table, and most of them relate to removing classes that kind of predate the ability for us to use pseudo selectors and stuff like nth child and stuff to target things as well. Gareth has just mentioned in the chat that there's some Bootstrap CSS classes embedded in the UI.js. He actually said BS classes, and I thought he said something else. Thought he meant something else, but it could probably go either way. But that, as to that, that'll probably be cleaned up as we transition away from UI. That's a whole other kettle of fish. But yeah, we want to minimize classes coming from PHP. Like ideally, what would be great is like Moodle just says, hey, here's a table, and then like if any classes get omitted, they should be coming from the template instead. That way, you can use, for instance, using Bootstrap 2, there are like table-bordered, table-rounded, table-whatever additional classes that can be added to tables, and we would really rather not be omitting those from Moodle. From the Moodle PHP. That said, there's obviously places where classes haven't been used presentationally, like just classes say like, oh, like this cell is the result of a calculation, like, and therefore needs to be targetable by JS. I personally, I may be shouted down, but I personally would prefer like using HTML5 data attributes where possible for that. They're just as targetable, and they're not involved in the presentation layer at all. Though of course you can target and style them, but that's maybe not great. As for the third point on this list, I'm sorry, just going point by point. The export for template function, yep, it's required in templatable, but ideally, and the reason for these points, and the reason I say ideally, the Mustache engine can actually, it doesn't need to take an array. It can take an object, which means it can take a standard class, but it also means it can take a regular class. So, if you were creating an entirely new component, which actually has everything in it that is already transformed and ready to be rendered, you could have a one-line export for template, which just returns a pointer to this, instead of having a huge big thing that just does. That is just a retargeted existing render function. I keep coming back to tables because in this example list that I was sharing on my desktop, I've got this table here. This table here is generated entirely from just passing an appropriate table context to a template. The export for template function in that implementation is currently 240 lines, and it's just pretty bad. I mean, I'm trying to, obviously, like when you're trying to match an existing API, like, things are going to get messy to begin with, but, ideally, in some perfect world, the platonic ideal here is, when you render a component, like, you shouldn't need to transform it such that it is ready to be rendered. It should always be ready to be rendered. Moving on. So you just click this button. And that's kind of it. But before I do that, let's actually sort of show you how things are going with that table example, and we can sort of chat about how things are going. So this table here, one really great feature in Mustache, and sort of the entire thing that we're basing our composition-esque element library on, is the ability for templates in Mustache to actually reference and include other templates. So, I mean, what's the simplest table? Like the simplest table example would be like an HTML table. And don't get me wrong, yeah, I recognize that this looks like horrible tag soup, but there is a method to this madness. All this does is emit either a TD or TH, depending on what you give it. This text that I've just highlighted here is what we refer to as the example context. The context being like data, presentational data that the template will bind to, and that example context is what's actually used in the template library that's included in 2.9. So you see here the HTML table cell, table context is what's being rendered here. So if you're going to write your template, you can put whatever in here and go like hello iMoot 2015 exclamation mark, save. And when I go back to it and I click that HTML table cell button, hello iMoot 2015. And in this way, we allow you to write your own examples. But obviously that's really simple. Like, what happens if we want to render a whole row of cells, right? And then we can use this context, where this part, that's just the tag here. But what's really interesting here is lines 60 to 62, where we use this syntax here. So what this means is it's going to expect an array called cells as part of the data context, and for every element in that array, it's going to include the table cell template and bind that each object to the data context for that template. So you can pass it this kind of example context here. Where, I don't know if you can see. Yeah, so the context is basically just an array called cells, where each one is Richard has just said my text editor is Sublime. I'm not sure if he's just stating a fact or flattering. I'm not sure. But anyway, yes. Yeah, so this cells array is just two copies of, yes, it is Sublime. It is Sublime. It's default Sublime. Anyway, so the cells array contains two contexts, like one for each cell. And the end result, of course, in the example, I'm just going to go click that now, and you can see, hey, look, the table cell header with row scope, and then that's a table cell. And then, like, we're not limited here by there isn't like a maximum level of depth here. I mean, we can always go deeper. So here's the HTML table example here, and if we look at the the mesh template for that table, if you scroll past the really long thing, that we're using that array syntax here to have 3 groups of table rows: one for the T head, one for the T body, one for the T foot. We're doing some interesting caption and caption hide, and that all combines to create this kind of table, where you have your header, your body, your footer, because this now default as of, I think it was 2.7 when we did that. Because it's clean as default, in this example, I'm actually using Bootstrap 2 styles in my data context to add Bootstrap 2 styles to that. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a taste for that. As far as further reading goes, Damien, who led the charge on this templating work, he's written up this really, really deep dive on templates, which you can find on the wiki, and that's that first link. Secondly, there's a live Mustache demo. If you've ever used it's basically almost like a REPL. If Mustache was in an evaluated language, but it lets you. I'm just going to open it. Oh wait, I can't open it. Well, maybe I can. So you get to this kind of thing here, and you can put your template in there, put your dot text, and as you type, it'll actually show you what's being generated by putting your data text to your Mustache template. If you want to look at the work that I'm currently doing as part of moving from renderers to templates, that's that third link, which will take you to our tracker. The issue number is unfortunately been moved onto 2 lines, but it's MDL 50148. Yeah, at this point, does anyone have any questions? Because that's pretty much all I've got for you tonight. You can just put the questions if you have them in the chat, or failing that, Gareth, do you have any questions?
Hi, Jetha. Yeah, Gareth from the iMoot team. Wow, just waiting for people to put questions in there. So I certainly take this opportunity to thank you. I mean, I've read up a bit, and another gentleman posted on the developers forum, he had a working version of this, which I looked at he had a working version of the clean theme. I've forgotten his name now. But the developer.
If you find that, I'll be looking for it later. But it's always good to see that work. I see some questions here. First from Anne, will this also make it easier to extend functionality? That is a good question. Do you mean in terms of extending? What do you mean? To for example, to change the way that a calendar is shown. Okay. That's obviously going to depend on what exactly the change is. In principle, what we really want is to just supply one data context that can be rendered in however many ways. So, if we give you the month of January, you should really be able to easily determine, in your template, you should be able to say, hey, this is being rendered, with Monday as the start of the week, as opposed to Sunday, or whatever it is you're feeling on that particular holy war. Yeah. Yeah. In my mind, it would make that easier, but I don't quite know. We should have some firmer answers on that by the Australian Moot, which is coming up very shortly. I think about a month from now. Sorry for handballing that question away, but if it's any comfort, I will probably be giving the presentation at that Moot as well. So hopefully we'll have an answer for you by then. Now Ralph has a question. The question is, oh, right. Okay. I'll sorry, I wasn't quite clear that we were done there, but sorry, just continuing with Anne's question. She now runs into situations where there sometimes isn't even a renderer to extend / change, and if there is, the output isn't easy to change. Yeah, this is well, whatever. Whatever. Okay. That was my mistake. I made a pronoun as that assumption there. Okay. Yeah, there's, as I alluded to, I think on the second slide of the presentation, it's a really great opportunity for us to go through and kind of clean house. There's so many parts of Moodle that, I mean, are powerful, but are not necessarily the greatest. They're not necessarily all there. I mean, we've been trying to move in this kind of direction for years now. I think this might be like the 6th or 7th attempt, and sort of as a legacy of that, we have some components which are renderable and some which are not. And that's a huge pain for developers, as you well know. And that's actually what led me to deal with HTML table first. Before I was put on this project, I was actually doing a bunch of work for the partners site, which has sort of a custom CRM built on top of Moodle. And there's just endless tables on that site, and you end up kind of getting a good appreciation for that, having to do all of that. And I mean, for those of you who don't know how we do our tables right now, the HTML table class is not actually renderable, right? It's just a container. It's basically just a struct, and then there's this horrendous method in the HTML writer class, which it's called table, and it takes an HTML table as its parameter, and then it spends like a couple hundred lines of PHP doing God knows what, and finally emits emits a whole bunch of inline attributes and CSS classes attached to your HTML table, and that's obviously not extensible, and it's obviously horrible, just absolutely horrid to maintain. But yeah, one good thing about doing all of this is that we have the opportunity to go in and kind of finally bring everything, well, as close to everything as possible, up to the same line, which will hopefully, address issues like you had with calendars and such. I hope that answers your question. And at this point, I will just wait for you to say that answers your question, because I don't want to move on and until you're satisfied. Cool. Good. All right. So the second question comes from Ralph Hilgenstock. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but this question is: do I understand correctly that existing rendering processes and custom renderings will work in 3.0? Yes. Okay. So the old ways and the new ways will work perfectly fine in 3.0. Like nothing has changed with regards to our deprecation process. Even if we bring the new stuff in 3.0 and we immediately deprecated everything, this is in some mythical world where software is always done on time. You would, even if we started the deprecation process with 3.0, according to our deprecation standards, you would have until like 3.2, so a full year to move your stuff over. The only difficulties that I alluded to earlier were is that if you're, say, a plugin developer and you want to use the new API, that basically means you're going to have to write 2 code paths in order to support 2.9.3.0 as well as 2.8 and maybe even 2.7 if you've got some clients who are still on 2.7 LTS. But yeah, where the old toys don't go away until until we're allowed to do it, right? I mean, as much as we would like to move fast, we've made certain assurances, and we need to let you guys be. We need for you guys to be able to build on those assurances, right? Oh, on 2.0. Oh God. Yes, a friend of mine maintains Moodle 2.0 for Navitas, and I hear some things. Do we have any other questions? I hope that answers your question, Ralph. Oh, and now we're just trading war stories. Oh no. Don't suppose you have any questions yourself, Gareth?
Hi, Jetha. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's fascinating. It's really exciting. It's moving forward. I'm really looking forward to the work completing. Certainly the element library's been asked around for years and years, and wondering I monitor the moderate on the theme store and its discussion and that. So no, just to say, thank you for your hard work. Well, from my perspective, and I really hope it comes soon. I want to certainly try this out instead of my themes soon, maybe for some of the simpler themes. I did post a link in the chat for us, like prototype of the clean theme for people to grab. But yeah, can I just say, yeah, thank you, not only for myself, but also from the iMoot team for presenting, especially twice, and for your time, and especially as it's after midnight in Perth. And on a Monday.
Yeah. Thankfully it's Western Australia Day today, so it's a long weekend and it's all good.
So yeah, you'll be able to have a nice sleep, and you can stay up hopefully for the end.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Catch you all around.